All right, this next lecture is going to be on instancing. So let's go to project window, new, instancing. And the goal with this one is that we're taking a piece of geometry, like a cube, okay? And we're going to say, instead of my particles being a particle, I want my particles to be cubes. So I'm just going to create, under the n dynamics, I'm going to create n particles. And I'm going to leave this as points here. And just make an emitter. Okay, this is a volume emitter. We went over this. I'm just going to change my away from centers to off, and a long axis to on, and random direction maybe 1 also. Give us some more frames. Make sure that our playback range is set to real time. Max playback speed is real time. Playback speed is play reframe. So now we hit play. And you can see right away that the particles are falling. I haven't added gravity to this. In our previous one, we had to add gravity ourselves. With n particles, you don't. Okay. If I hit Control A, with n particles, I get the n particles, I get the emitter, and then I get a thing called the nucleus, just like we had with our other stuff, with n-cloth. So, just like n-cloth, we can play with the gravity. So I'm just going to lower the gravity a bit. There we go. Alright, I also have these things kind of shoot out a bit faster. So I'm just going to go to my speed and take this up to 10. Nope, not there, I guess. A long axis, 10. There we go. Alright, and I'm only going to have them shoot out that far until frame 70. So at frame 70, I'm just going to come to my rate, right click, key selected, go to 71, and cut it off. So we'll have this, and then they'll start to fall down. Okay, so what if I said, okay, instead of having these pieces of geometry here, I want this to be it. So we're going to take this cube and say, okay, this cube is going to be where every single one of these particles are. So we grab the cube, we go to the n particle menu, we go to instancer replacement, option box, always option boxes. And we say, okay, we're instancing the cube, and it's going to go on to n particle shape 1. If we had 15 particle systems, we want to obviously pick the correct one. Hit create, and now you see we have cubes all over the place. So we rewind, we hit play, and then you can see how all these cubes are coming together. You can also see how they're touching, okay? And that's just going to be, they're going to touch because they're being created at this point, even if I stretch this guy out. Right when they're born, they're going to be like hitting each other in some areas. Like right there, there's like 3 of them clustered together. Okay, so we can go in here and adjust some of the properties. So if I go to n particle menu, I go to collisions, and I say self collide, we'll probably get bananas happening. Nope, not too bad. Okay, but once we go in here, let me hit play again, and then we look at the solver display and say self collision. It is colliding with it. Just don't know why they're not hitting more. Let's bunch this together and see what happens. Maybe I have it just too spread apart. Let's turn that off. Well, they seem to be doing a pretty good job. They're still colliding a little bit. You can see this is colliding, that's colliding. I can take the bounciness up maybe if I wanted to. Just for fun, I'll take the self-collision thickness up to 2. And you see they're still going to go through each other, intersect each other a little bit. I'll put in a plane, and we'll make that a passive object. And then obviously we need more frames, otherwise we're not going to hit. And I'm going to turn on wireframe and shaded just so we can see this stuff happening. So you can see they are intersecting. They're, you know, it's not a perfect simulation. We could probably take this self-collide width up. I'll make it 12. There they go. Now they're going kind of crazy. And now they're definitely not touching each other. And if I look at their self-collision, it's huge. So maybe we can get away with 4. And 4, it doesn't look like they're really hitting each other. No, 4 looks like that was probably a good number where we're actually getting like some stacking and stuff. Now, because of their self-collision thickness, you can see that like this guy is actually probably wedged in a good spot, but the other ones are kind of floating above it. So it's never going to be a super duper perfect animation without lots and lots of tweaking on here and playing around. Okay, and it's also going to depend on your shape. Okay, so we can do other stuff too. Like right now, these cubes are basically staying perfectly vertical. If I go into my end particle shape, somewhere in here, there's an instancing pull down right there. And we can control different things. So I can say rotation, aim direction, velocity. And what that means is that the direction it's going to aim. Okay? It's kind of hard to tell in this case, but that's what's happening. It wasn't when it turned, but before it was. There we go. Okay, and you'll see that they're kind of like acting funny because they're trying to rotate with how they're moving, and as they move, then they're like freaking out. Okay, so instancing isn't going to be a end-all cure for, you know, I just want a bunch of people and then it's going to look cool. Okay, I think you guys have been in Maya long enough that you already know that nothing is like that. So let's delete this cube here. Let's make something a bit more interesting. Hit play. We're back to where we were. If I go to the outliner, there is this instancer guy here. I'm going to delete that. So now we just have our emitter, particles, nucleus, and plane, and our n-rigid, which is the plane being rigid. I'm going to go to create sphere. And I'm going to create a cube. And this is just really like simple geometry that I'm just adding in here just so you can see the effect of it. Okay, so now let's say I wanted to take this shape and I wanted to instance this. So I'm going to grab all 3, go to my instancer. There they are. Here's this. I hit create. And you can see that we're getting just planes. Okay, well I rewind it and I hit play again. So now, whatever. So now we have these planes here. And if I go to the instancer, it has some things in here for object index. The index is basically which one of these particles I'm showing. So if I come down to my per particle array, add dynamic attributes, and I hit general, I can say particle ID, not ID, num. There we go. I'm going to make it an integer. My values are going to be 0 to 3, and I'll just hit OK. Oops, I didn't want to do that. What am I doing? General, particle num. It's not an integer, it's a float, and it's a per particle array. That's what I want to do. Float per particle. Alright, so particle number, I'm going to right click and go to creation expression. And I'm going to make an expression that will pick one of these three objects. So I'm going to say particle num equals rand 0 to 3. And just so you can see that better, that's my expression right there. Particle num equals rand 0, 3. Okay, so now I've created it here, but then I have to go up to my instancing, or down to my instancing, and from object index I have to choose it. Here's particle num. So now I rewind and I hit play, and then you can see that we're getting one of those three objects. Okay, so big deal, that's not what we wanted. We wanted it to look like this. We wanted just one object. Okay, that's not a big deal either. I'm going to delete the expression. I'm going to set this back to none. And I'm going to go grab these three objects, and I'm going to go to Mesh Combine. Okay. Delete the history. Go to my outliner. Delete that instancer guy. I'm going to grab the group, or the instance, or the polygon. Go to End Particles, and go to Instancer. There's our polysurface. Create. And now you can see that we have I'm delaying for dramatic effect. Oops, rewind, play. There we go. We have a bunch of these little things kind of flying out. Okay. And just like before, I can grab them, go to their aim direction, hit velocity. So now they'll be aiming in the direction that they're moving. And when they hit the ground, they'll probably freak out. Not too bad, a little bit. And now you can imagine this. I created a spaceship. I could have a fleet of spaceships kind of flying out into space to go attack the bad guy. I could also take this and I could add a field to it like turbulence. Okay? And turbulence will just kind of shake it up a little bit. So they're not just all going in the same direction. Let me take my attenuation off. Alright, so I'm actually going to take this up to like 27.568384216842115. And I hit play. And now you can see these things are kind of coming out and they're moving around. And you can see how they're rotating. It does look a little bit funny just because of how they're moving. But obviously I've kind of upped the settings so that we have more of a apparent effect. Basically we'd want to do like a very subtle effect. And that subtle effect would be more effective in the long run than doing something like this. And I could even play with this and say, okay, well, I want them to still do that, but I want more push. So I can go to my emitter and then go to my long axis and make this like 30. Now they should like launch out of here. And by launch, I mean barely go. Let's make that 60. Let's make the random direction 5. There we go. So now we have a swarm of enemy fleets flying at us. Beware. Okay, and this can be as complex of a piece of geometry or as simple as a piece of geometry as we need to be. The only thing we have to be careful of is if we have, in some students' cases, a 100,000 polygon spaceship, and we've duplicated it this many times. This is about 60 some times. I can go to display, heads up, particle count. There it is. 287 particles. Yes. So the 287 particles. So duplicating 100,000 polygons 287 times is obviously going to slow the machine down. And it's better to be effective at your stuff than it is to be just like crazy. And if we're testing something, we can always set this to a lower value in our emitter. I can go to my emitter here, go to my keyframe, right click on it, go to the emitter rate output, change my value to 10. I can preview it at 10, see how I like it, and then play with my settings, get it to look good. Once I'm done, then I up this back to 100 or whatever it is my end result is going to be. All right. So that gives us the next stage of this is that we've taken 3 pieces of geometry and combined it to create that. So I'm going to just delete my instancer. I'm going to take this guy and go to Mesh Separate. That breaks him back into 3 pieces. I'm going to delete the history on him. I'm going to go to the outliner. And just ungroup those things. There we go. And then what I'm going to do is make a little animation with this. Okay, so I've made my pivots in the center of this guy. I'm going to kind of focus this timeline in just on 12 frames. There we go. So I'm going to grab both of these, set some keyframes for just the rotates, go to the end, set them again. Okay, so 12 and 1 are the same keyframes. I'm going to go to 4, and I'll rotate this guy up here, this guy up here. I'll set my keyframe for both those. I'm going to go to 8. Rotate this guy down here. Rotate that guy, oops, down there. Set my keyframe. And then if we watch, let me turn my grid off. Go to wireframe, change my color a little bit so we can see this better. Hit play. You'll see it looks like it's kind of like flapping. Okay, I'm going to go to the graph editor just to kind of tweak some of these things here. I basically want these start ones and these end ones to just be like linear. So he comes here to there and then back. No, not really liking that animation. Looks funny. So I'm going to cut this here and paste it there. There we go. He starts up, then he goes down, then he goes up again. That might make more sense. It might seem like it's a little bit more fluid. There we go. That seems much better. Okay. Now frame 1 and frame 12 are exactly the same. So I'm actually just going to shrink this then to frame 11. Okay, so if I hit play, it'll look like it's the same animation because we're going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and then coming back to 1. When we had it at 12, we were actually getting like a double frame. It's not a huge deal, but let's get rid of it. I'm also going to take this one and cut it and move this back to like 6. There we go. That looks better. Okay, so now we take this, and we're going to run into the same issue. If I take this and if I put it on the instance, it's going to do one piece at a time. If I group them, sometimes grouping will work too. I don't know if it's just student luck or what. Sometimes people are able to get it to actually group and work. Okay, so I'm going to go to and particles, instancer, grab the group, create, and there it is. Okay, so in this case it is working, but if you watch it, there's no animation on it. Okay, so I'm just going to undo, get back to where we were. So what I want to do is I want to combine these, and again, if I combine them, same thing as a group, it's not gonna. Well, it's odd that it's actually moving. That might be a 2014 new thing where now it's moving. Maybe if I delete the history, it won't move anymore. There it is. So once I delete the history, it stops moving. Okay, so obviously that's not going to be a healthy option either. So what I need to do is And this is going to sound crazy, but it's going to work. I'm going to group it just so I have a group. I'm going to go to frame. Come on. I'm going to go to frame 1, and I'm going to duplicate it. I'm going to go to frame 2, grab the group again, duplicate it. Go to frame 3, grab group 1, duplicate it. Go to frame 4, grab group 1, duplicate it. Go to 5. You see what I'm getting at, where I'm just duplicating that group again. And what this is doing is creating like a snapshot of each one of my poses that I want my guy to be in. There we go. So I can hide group 1 now, because that's my animated one. And if I look at each one of these groups, it's kind of like a still of our animation. Okay, so that's what we have. So now what I need to do is go in each one of these groups and go to Mesh Combine. And then I need to delete the history on it. So I'll go into 3, Mesh Combine, delete the history. Go into 4, Mesh Combine, delete the history. Now, just so that we're kind of learning new stuff as we're going, if I go down here to the script editor, and I go and grab these objects like that, I go to Mesh Combine, you can see that there's a command in here called polyunite, right there, okay? And if I middle drag that polyunite down here, there's another command called delete history. I middle drag that down here and just put a semicolon between them, so they have their own line, polyunite, and then delete history. I'm going to grab that group again. I'm going to grab these two commands and middle drag them to my shelf and click it. And you see what it's going to do is it's going to unite it and then delete the history. So now I can go into group 6, click the button, go into group 7, click the button, go into group 8, click the button. So we're just making this a little bit more efficient is what we're doing. And if you hunt around, you can even find a script on Google that will actually do a lot of this stuff, not on Google, but somewhere in the internet, that will do a lot of this stuff for us. But it's important to see how to do it manually, because you can't always find those scripts in the 3 minutes it would take to actually do it. All right, so now we have all of these pieces of geometry. They're all good. Let's go and attach them to our particles. So we have them all selected. We go to, not there, End Particle Instancer. Here's all of our geometry, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, all the way to 15. There's our particle, create. So now we hit play. Oops, let me adjust my frame rate. And we're still only getting one of these guys to come out. Okay? So what we have to do is tell Maya we want to cycle our particles. So I'm going to go to the outliner, grab my instancer, and in here where it says cycle, I can say cycle sequential. And as I rewind and hit play, you can see now they're coming out and they're actually like flapping. And they all look like they're flying. It's gorgeous. You can get very complex with what you do with this. This sequential is essentially going through, where are we at? And using this object index, you can see that right now it's grayed out. It's using this object index for each particle to kind of cycle through that whole sequence. In this example, there is a crowd of people. Some are red, some are blue. There's a bunch of people down here doing stuff. Here's another one.
Large dense crowds show aggregate.
Essentially, this is the same kind of thing. Obviously, this is on a different type of scale. And this is actually all of these guys like interacting and following paths and stuff. This is like a whole different kind of setup. But essentially, it's the same thing. You're taking a clip animation and you're like assigning it to all these particles and then having them interact together. Here's another example here where they have a bunch of animals running. There are a bunch of different kinds of animals. And you can use a bunch of different things to do something like that. Here's another thing. There's a couple different things. So what we can do is we could actually create several different animations and have them all come off the same particle system and have them be different kinds of animation. Like on this guy, he's a sphere with two of these flapping wings. Well, I could have a cube with two flapping spheres. And this one I have a triangle with two flapping helixes. Or over here I have a cat running, and here I have a deer running, and here I have a bear running. Or if this is flying, obviously you could have different kinds of birds all doing these different kinds of animations. And we could set them all up through this same kind of thing. But where this object index would come in is we would go up to here, create a couple expressions, and then we would control initially which one of these objects is in here. Okay, so if this one's supposed to be a cat, it would get like number 4 as being a cat. And then it would cycle through 4's animation. If this one's 5, it would grab 5's animation. If this one's 6, it would grab 6's animation. Okay, so this is really, really a huge thing because you can do a whole lot of stuff just kind of playing around with these different kinds of settings. Okay, and we're just keeping it very simple right now, but this is really, I think it's probably one of the most important topics that we're going to cover because it's still kind of new in the fact that we can do a lot more with it now, and there's a lot more demand for it now. You know, if you think about the audiences that they have in theaters that are all like digital, you could replace a lot of people using these kinds of things. Okay, so some important things that we're going to have to keep note of. Let me delete my instance. I'm going to delete my flapping wing guy, delete my group 1. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to model something new now. I'll model a cylinder, and I'm just going to rotate it. And I'm just going to make literally like an arrow. There we go. So we have an arrow. This could be used as a missile. It could be used as whatever. Just for fun, we'll actually make it like a missile type thing. Oh, I need to go that deep. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to take this guy, delete his history. And I'm going to go to the outliner, just make sure my instance was deleted. Go to my instancer replacement. There he is. Create. Rewind, hit play. Okay. So now you can see all my guys are kind of coming out sideways. While my particles are shooting this way, this guy is originally oriented that way, so that's the way he's going to come out. So you'd say, okay, well, let's just grab the aim direction and set that to velocity. And now they're coming out this way, which is obviously not the correct way either. And then I think when they hit, you can see they're kind of like sticking through the ground. Okay. So all this has to do with the direction that I created this guy in and where he's created at, or where he's modeled at. So I kind of pulled him above the grid, and I've aimed him in the positive Z direction. Okay. So Maya doesn't like that. It likes your front of the object to be in the positive X direction. That way. So if I look down here, this is the positive X. That's the positive X. So I go to put this back at the origin. And wherever I put the tip of this at the origin, that's where my particle is going to be coming from. So I'm going to put it back here. And we're going to say modify freeze transformations. There we go. I'm going to rewind. We're going to hit play again. And now you can see that they're coming out at the exact right spot. And you can kind of see where they're pivoting from too. And as they collide, he's going to stick into the ground until that particle hits the ground. Okay? So I can say, well, that's kind of stupid. I don't want that to happen. So I'm going to grab this ground and go to End Particles. And go to the Particle Collision Event Editor. Couldn't see it at first. And all I want to do is just say the original particle, when it collides with something, it's going to die. Okay, original particle dies. Create event. So I rewind, I hit play. Let's get rid of that turbulence because it's like making them go wonky. Okay, these are missiles. There wouldn't be a whole lot of turbulence on them. There they go. Hitting their peak. And now they're going to start falling down. Man, they're going slow. I got to up that gravity some. So now when they hit the ground, you can see that they're just going right through the ground because they're just disappearing. So what we can do is, let's go to play. Let's grab the particles and look at their collision. Okay, now I have to have this bigger than the object itself so that it'll collide. So I'm going to just scale this up. Turn that off. Rewind, we hit play. And it's still kind of hitting in a weird spot, which is fine. Okay? And sometimes this is the case where it just, the particle literally wants to hit the ground, not the end particle. Okay? So it's reading that particle colliding with the ground. So I could try a couple things. One thing I could try is taking this thickness up. Okay, let me display the collision thickness for this. Turn that off. Hit play. Then we'll wait and see what happens. Okay, and you can see they're still pretty much going mostly into the ground. Let me take this thickness up to like 10. There we go. And I think at that point we've kind of hit it where it's hitting and then dying off. Okay, so that kind of makes sense, but then we might want something else to happen there. Okay, so what I can do is I'm going to grab these particles here and I'm going to say end particles, end particle, emit from object. Now you're asking, okay, you're emitting particles from particles. Yeah, I'm that crazy. So I'm going to go and make this a brand new solver. I'm going to do an omni emitter. Speed, let's say 0.25. Speed random, 0.25 also. Create. So now we rewind. And when we hit play now, you can see that now our missiles have a little trail coming from behind them. Let's make this speed a little bit more. Not speed. Max distance. There we go. So I'll take this max distance up on here, and what it'll do is give me a little bit more of a volume emitting. There we go. So now we have more of a volume coming out of here. I can take the rate up too. Okay. And again, I have, this is smoke, so it really wouldn't be like falling like that. So let's take the gravity off in this case. If I want gravity, I'll add new gravity onto it. There we go. Now we can see it a little bit better. And then it just stops right there. Okay. So what I can also do with this is I can set up an explosion to happen right when it hits. So I'm going to go to here, outliner. Oops, not there, sorry. Particle collision event editor, that's what we want. Okay, so I'm going to grab not particle 2, I'm going to go back to particle 1, okay, where we told it that the original particle is going to die, and I'm going to say I want it to emit. So I want to emit 50 particles. So now when it hits, we should see particles being emitted. And I think I broke it. So somehow I interpreted what I wanted as emit new particles and then basically make those particles rockets too. I didn't want that to happen. So I'm going to figure out why I did that and then I'll be right back. Alright, typically what happens is when we do this, it creates a brand new particle. Well, it didn't in this case. So I'm going to delete the event, clear that field out, and I'm just going to make a new event on here saying emit 50, create event. Okay, and now it's creating particle 3. Weird. Alright, so now when we hit play, it's going to create a brand new object that's going to come out of here. And this is still going kind of slow. Obviously, we'd speed this up some. So it dies. If we look super duper close, there is a couple particles right there. Okay. We haven't really set any properties up on this, so we're just getting exactly that. So I can take the spread up. I can take the inherent velocity up. I'm going to also take up on these particles here. I'm going to re-up that gravity to 9.8. Okay, and there's those particles coming out. Now this 50 is, should be actually 50 particles, but it's not. It's obviously like only a couple. And just to verify that, I can go to the particle shape. I can go to particle render type. Render styles. Yeah, it's probably the bottom. I think they moved this stuff around to me on purpose. I opened it, I just wasn't paying attention. Here it is, particle render type points. We can change this to numeric. And then where it says particle ID, if we look at this, there actually are 50 particles kind of bunched up really, really close right there. Okay, so they are there. Let's go back to point. I just may need to take this inherent velocity up and maybe even put these particles on an entirely different system. So I can go to end solver, assign solver, make a new solver. And let's rewind it and play. Because probably what's happening is they're colliding with the ground and then freaking out. Alright. Spread. Let's take the spread up more. Well, 2's the highest. Let's really take that number up. For some reason, the other one wasn't working, so I just remade it, and now it's working. The only thing I did differently, kind of after the fact, is that I put each one of my particles on a separate nucleus. So these guys here, my first particles that are coming out, that are instancing the rockets, those ones are on nucleus 1. These trails are on nucleus 3, I believe it is. And then my little explosions down here, right there, are on nucleus 2. Okay? And I think I can see that if I scroll all the way down here. Nope, I can't. If I hit Control A, I can see it right there. Nucleus 2, nucleus 3, and if I grab the other one, nucleus 1. Okay? So I can go to nucleus 3 and just take some of the gravity off. Okay? Eventually, or ideally, we'd want to do all this stuff anyway. Just so that we don't have the trails falling like they were. They shouldn't be really falling because it's smoke. If anything, they should be kind of rising a little bit. Like that. We can add a little bit of wind noise in here. There we go. And obviously we don't want these to live forever. So I'm going to grab those for the trails. I'll just call these trails. Oops. Let's make sure we can click and type. And then let's go to the outliner and grab our other stuff. Let's grab 4. That's our explosion. 3. Why do I have 4? Let's see. This one here coming out. That's that one. Yes. The rocket. Or missile. These guys here are the trails. Oh. Just named it in the wrong spot. And then the explosion here is explosion. Alright. So now we have those 3 things. Each one's on their own emitter. And I also did, instead of doing the, taking this thing and adjusting the thickness of it to kind of fit, what I did was I created 2 planes. So here's one plane. This plane is only on the nucleus 1. Okay, so if I go to this plane, it's on nucleus 1. So what that means is that the rockets are going to collide with this guy. I can take the divisions down so we don't see that. There. The rocket's going to collide with this guy and do the collision. Okay, and then these other particles will then bounce out and then fall down. Okay, so we hit play. And you can see that these other particles kind of fall out and then they fall down. And you can see they're actually kind of floating. If I go to wireframe here, here's those other particles. Here's this. So I can take this thickness down. It's easier to find it here. 0.1. Oops. 0.05. as close as we're going to get it. Okay, and then the distance between this plane and that plane is just the height of the rocket, or wherever I want it to break. So you can see here, it's almost touching the ground, and then the next frame, boom, it's gone. Okay. So what we're doing, the explosion actually happens a little bit higher, but what we would be doing is having this thing bigger than it already is. All right. So I'm going to hit play. These trails last forever, so let's get rid of that. So let's go to lifespan, random range, and let's say 1 and 1. Okay. And then these guys here, in order for them to come up as high as they did, I had to go to this plane and go to the bounce. And I'm just changing the bounce attribute so that as they come in and hit, you can see the kind of explosion that we'd be getting. Now, I want to actually turn the visibility of this plane off. Or I can put on the layer and just template it. That'll probably be easier. Okay. So I can see if I like the height of that. If I need more height, I can always grab that plane in the attribute editor. There it is. Or the outliner. And then change the bounce. So let's go to 2. Alright. Maybe 2 is a little bit too much. Let's cut it in half. There we go. 1.5 is good. Okay. These guys here, I don't want them to last forever. Alright. My explosion ones, I'm going to go to lifespan. Think. No, I don't want to go lifespan. I want to go to maybe lifespan. We'll see. Particle collision event editor. And I just want it to die when it hits the ground. Okay? So either hit play. So you can see they're dying right when they're hitting the ground. Okay, they're not going through. Perfect. So then what I can do is take those explosions and I can go to N particle, create N particles, create emit from object. And I'm emitting more particles from those ones. And those will be the explosion trail. Okay. And the explosion trail I'll put on a different shape. So here's my particle 3 or 1 explosion trail. I'm going to put these on a new solver. There we go. Okay, and they're going to fall straight through the ground because their nucleus is set to have crazy amounts of gravity, so let's lower the gravity. I want some on this one, I think, but I don't want it to be 9.8. Maybe even 1, I think would be good. Okay. Then I'm going to go to, here's the explosion. Under here is the emitter. So I'm going to go to that emitter, and I can change the speed. Adding a little bit more speed will give me a little bit bigger area. Okay, you can see how it's spread out here. That's what I'm going to be getting. I'm going to add maybe a little bit more here, maybe like 300 particles. Something like that. Just massive destruction. And just for fun, just so all not hitting the same area, I'm going to take my emitter and just keyframe it. Starting here. And then we'll go up to, say, 100. And keyframe it there. And then we can also just take this and let's make the rate 30. Let's take the speed up to 20. We'll take both of our planes and just really scale them up. And then at 100, I'm just going to cut this off. So let's turn that off at 100. Here it comes. And then everything we did for the sprites, we can do for these guys. We can actually have those add sprites to all of these trails to get them. Or we can even go into the trail thing here. Let me go to the trails. Particles are so fun. You can just add and add and add onto these things forever. There's actually just, I get sidetracked a lot too. Ground explosion. Instancing. Nomen. I don't even know if they'll still have it. Let's just see. Yes, they do. There we go. Okay, so this image here, essentially they're doing an explosion, but then they have rocks instanced on the outsides of these. Okay, so we're essentially what we're doing with the rockets, but instead of just stopping at these smoke plumes, or fire plumes, whatever you're gonna call them, where they would add rocks to the end of those things here, these trail transforms. No explosion. They would add to the explosion there. And just so you can see what that would kind of look like, here's a sphere. Oops. I'm just going to sculpt it a little bit. I'm just using the sculpt deformer, just like we kind of did in some of the other assignments. It's not ever bad to kind of go back to some of those assignments if you forget, you know, I don't remember that tool, whatever. Alright, so there's my rock. Beautiful. Okay. And the way they do it is they have like 15 rocks and it randomly picks, you know, which rock it should go to. Alright, so there we go. I'm going to freeze the transforms. I'm going to instance my rock. Wrong menu. And I want it to go into the explosion shape. Yes. Great. So now if we look, my rocks are huge, bigger than anything else that's around. Shrink it down. I'll freeze the transform again. There we go. So now at the edge of these things, you can see there's a tiny little rock that's going to be coming out as well. Then the rock's eventually going to disappear. Now just for the sake of the speed of this, because it's obviously going really, really slow, I'm just going to go back to my emitter, my very first emitter, go to my rate, and then just set that rate to like 5. And that might even be too high just for previewing. Yeah, you can see it's going pretty slow. Let's go to 2. Alright, so let's go through and kind of iron out some of the stuff here to get this looking really good. Okay, firstly, the texture on these rockets. We want to set all that stuff up before we even instance. We can still do it now. If I added a material to the rocket, there's a blend on there, or a Mia, or whatever, it'll inherit it. So I make this pink, and there we go. You'll never see them coming. Alright, now we'll go to, here's our rocket. These are the rockets instancing shooting out. Here's the arrow. Here's the emitter. So let's give these guys a little bit more smoke trail coming out. So I'm going to go up to 500. And now we'll have 500 particles coming out on this trail. So let's call this trail emitter. Okay. And then here's where we can play with the max distance. Here's where we can play with the speed. If I add more speed to this, what it's going to do is just give me kind of like a bigger cone at the end of it. So just a matter of what you want to do with that. That might even be good there. 1,000 is my rate, and then 0.25 is the distance, 0.5, 0.25 for speed, and speed random. Okay. So I'm going to go and grab these particle trails. There we go. I'm going to go to shading, and I'm going to make these cloud. Okay. This is what cloud is. It's just like little puffs of smoke. So you can see they already kind of look like smoke. I can play with this threshold to get it to change how they're blending together. I don't know if that really appeared any different. Yeah, it didn't. All right, ignore threshold. Oh, that's for the, never mind, that's for blobby. All right, there's surface shading, which we don't really need to worry about. There's opacity, which obviously we can play with to get different opaque settings here. But where the magic comes in is by grabbing these guys here, lighting and shading, assigning new material, and then going to particle cloud. And then in here, we give them a color. So for smoke, let's go with like gray bluish color. All right. So there's our smoke. Here's transparency, so we can adjust that as well. Okay. We can brighten this up a little bit more so we can see it better. All right, so there's the smoke. Now, it's not going to really look realistic if all the smoke is the exact same color or all the transparency is the exact same. So they have these life colors and life transparencies. Let's go there so we can see a couple of these things. I'm going to map on life color a ramp. We love ramps. So I'm going to hit back button until I get here. If I forget where it is, I just grab the particles. Never shows it. Right click on the particles, go to material attributes. Here's the particle cloud. Here's the ramp. Click the arrow. So they were there. So now if I hit the render button, and I think I'm rendering this, yeah, I'm rendering this bigger than I need to. Let's go back to test resolution, camera settings. All right, so now we're starting off red, going to green, and then going to blue, okay? So what I can do is kind of say, okay, right when it comes out, we would have some sort of fiery thing here. So let's go look at a picture of, it's a cartoony picture. But something like this, you see how it's like super white and then it would turn into red and then it would go into the smoky stuff. So I'm going to go with white. I'm going to go with some red, orange color here. Pop in some red. And then back here we're going to go with black. But I'm going to mix in, way back here, I'm going to mix in some other colors. So I'm just going to keep this black. And then click this and then do a, let's do volume noise. Okay, so this will just be random colors inside. And I'm just going to take the amplitude down so we have more of the blackness than we do lightness. Okay. Maybe I'll take that to just dark gray. So it blends better. Alright, so now if we look at this, you can see it looks like we have basically like a fire trail and then we have this smoke coming off. My volume noise is actually pretty noisy. So I'm going to go to the volume noise and take the frequency down. There it is. Frequency down means bigger patterns here. This is less frequent. So we actually get more of a smoke look to this. Okay. So that's looking pretty cool. I think I want to take this yellow. And I'm going to take the value of it and just kind of fake it and bump it up to 3. There we go. So it really looks like it's hot in there. And I can bunch these guys up together even more. Just kind of bring that in a little bit closer. There we go. So that looks pretty cool. So now I'm going to go back to my particles, and then under life transparency, I'm going to go to add a ramp. Ramps are great because you can vary it along their age. Okay, so here's where they're born. This is where they die, just like before. So right when they're born, I want these things to be pretty opaque. Okay, and I'm just going to make sure I get it correct. Yes, that's right. And then white's going to be transparent. There we go. So you can see we go from very, very opaque, and then we gradually get transparent. That's kind of what we want. I'm just going to take this end color and again map something to it, like a volume noise. But in this case, I don't want to take this down because I want those white values. So I can actually pull the threshold up so I keep the white values. There we go. And then again, take my frequency down so that I get softer values here. This is a softer trail, that's all it is. All right. Cool. So there's the smoke there. These things hit, they explode. And for the explosions, I'm actually going to use something different. I'm going to use shading again. Where is it at? If you're like me when you watch videos, it's kind of like you're yelling at me. Oh, it's right there. It's right there. Shading. Right there in front of me. All right, we're going to make these as tubes. Okay. And tubes essentially have, just like a cylinder would, it has a start radius and an end radius. Here's the start radius, here's the end radius. So play with those. There we go. And then it has a tail size as well. So I'll leave it at 1. We'll see where we're at. Let's render it. Okay, nothing too fancy. I'm going to assign a new material, particle cloud. Alright, so there we have something happening here. I think I want to go back to that. Go back to... Oops, click the right thing. Just looking at that tail size, seeing how long I want the tail size to be. There we go. It's kind of streaking it a little bit. That's what I want. I'm going to reverse these. I think I have the radiuses backwards, and it's giving me some funky results. Yeah, that looks better. If I switch these back, it might have just been the angle I was looking at it too. Let me save that one. You can see I'm getting like a bunch of like dots in here. I still have those dots. That might just be where it's hitting weird. Or it might be a different particle kind of showing through. Or my rocks. That's what it might be, is my rocks. I might have a rock really close to that. Alright, whatever it is. Well, I guess either way we're basically about the same thing. I don't know, just look funny. Alright, so maybe the tail might be too long too. We can shrink the tail. I think I want to shrink this even more. And if I look really close at these, and I play with that tail size, you can see how they're kind of connecting to the tail. Like these two guys are together. So I don't want to go like too crazy on these tail sizes. I want to keep them pretty close. Oops, let me zoom out. Alright, so I've gotten a little bit sparse there. So let's go 0.1, 0.05. Let's see how we're looking. Alright, so I guess I'm going to go up higher. I think I want to go 0.2, 0.4. I think it's going to be too much. Yep. 0.2, 0.1. I think it's probably looking good. Yeah, I can always add more particles here and have them spread out. And I think that's what I want to do too, is go to those explosion emitter and just have that speed be a little bit more. So if I take that up to 2, when these things hit the ground, there should be a bit more spread in them. There we go. Let's take a look at that. Alright, so now there's a little bit more spread, and those are the rocks. That's what those little splotches are. So I need to change those to be a little bit bigger. Alright, so let me go and adjust this thing a little bit. So we're going to go to the material attributes for that. Come on. There we go. And this is going to be explosion trail. cloud. All right. So same thing, we can go in here to the cloud and go to ramp, drop a ramp on here and do the same kind of setup where we have this super bright white going into an orange, going into a red, and then going into that smoky black. Volume noise. There we go. Oops. And then just like before, let's take that frequency down. So we should have similar to the other one. Okay, so my mistake. I assigned these things to have this life color here. I just switched it back because it was not rendering the correct way. I wasn't getting the desired results that I wanted. And it turns out that what was happening is the particles didn't have a lifespan, so they were just freaking out. So I gave them a lifespan. Oops. And then that seemed to have gone away. So now we're getting something that's a bit more appealing to what we need. There you go. So now we're actually looking like we have some sort of smoke or something else in here. Let's pull this down even more. I really only want, because it's not a rocket, it's not like constantly burning fuel, I only want this to be like really, really tight here, and then that's like that. So it's really only like these embers are on fire, and then they gradually go into that. Very cool. All right, so then same thing for the opacity, life transparency. This time we can do solid fractal if we want to change it up a little bit. All you need is a black and white map. Oops. Can't just do it right to I do it to a ramp. Give it that start color of white, and then that end color we can add the solid fractal. So there we go. And you can see, I think on the other one it was the opposite. Go back to that one. Sometimes in Maya, if we go to here, no, it was black, okay. Sometimes in my memory, I forget which is transparent, because sometimes it's not just in my memory. Sometimes it is white as transparent, sometimes it's black as transparent, and Maya actually changes it on, they've changed it between versions before, which is very annoying. All right, so let's go back to that transparency. Let's go back to the solid fractal. Let's take the frequency ratio down. And the reason that they're not still turning into the white is because they're just living too long. They just haven't gotten to that phase yet where they can start dying off. There they go. So if I wanted the smoke to kind of stick around for a little bit, I could definitely do something like that. And I'm not really set on this solid fractal. I'm going to go back to the volume noise. With some playing around, you can get it, but why bother right now? There we go. So now we have these the smoke here. And what I could even do if I really, really wanted to add more definition to this, the tubes are good for creating this that smoky, that fiery look, because I can also go in here and add, so I can grab the glow intensity on here and pull that up, and then we probably have to rewind it. Oh, we still have some over here. There you go. We have some glowing stuff happening here. You can see the entire thing is glowing, obviously. But what I could do is have those tubes emit it first and then have smoke around it. So I could have basically emit two particles from the same one. I just don't want to go into that much detail or that much depth of particles and particles and particles and particles any more than I already have. Okay. So now if we were to look at our destruction scene from here, let me scale my rock up a little bit because I really want that rock to be at least visible. Okay, so now we can at least see the rock. So we'll save it. We'll render. And there's our World War III scene. All right, so this assignment, I've gone, I wanted to show you some of the extents of it. But you can really go and explore instancing and just create a scene that kind of shows off some of the instancing abilities. Okay. And with this, these are all software renderable, so I can actually render all of this in one shot. I don't have to go through there. It's only when we're doing stuff like the sprites or points or multi-point or streak or multi-streak that we need to render it out using that hardware render buffer. So I could even take this into Mental Ray, and I could even turn on Final Gather and render this out. And if this was like a full-blown production piece, we would actually want to render all these things out separately and then composite them on top of each other. So I'd render the rockets out separate, render their smoke trails out separate, render these guys out separate, render these rocks out separate. And then I want to put all that stuff together in post. That way I really have control over different colors and settings and blurs and whatever else. So it's still thinking. Mental Ray, for some reason, 2014, likes to take a very, very long time for that first rendering. So I'll just pause it until we get to it. All right, so there we are. I don't think it's probably any better looking except for the fact that we have a little bit of light hitting the surface here than our Maya render. Obviously, we want to put in lights in here too. We can't just like, okay, here's the instance. So we want to drop in some lights. Let's say a directional light for now. You can make it fancier. We'll render it again. Now we have shadows. They're going to be horrible shadows, but just so you can see that the particles will emit shadows too. And that'll really add a little bit of dimension to this too, kind of giving us some underlying darker colors behind our stuff. Okay, so think of these instancing things. You can really, as long as you're kind of directing that particle emission, you can use those for lots of things. If you had a character in a video game and he had a gun, and that gun had bullets in it, surprise, surprise, and the bullets were shooting out a special thing of whatever, something fancy, you could have the bullets instanced and their trails instanced and whatever else, the instanced and particled and set up, so that every time you hit it, you would get that same kind of animation shooting out of there. Okay? So in a final scene, I'd want to have all this stuff kind of laid out nice and neat. I'll show an example of later in class of the dynamic thing that I created, basically doing this exact thing here. Okay? Now, if there was something special you wanted to happen to one of the bullets, what we would do is animate a separate bullet by itself. Okay? So we would have maybe a second emitter. If I created an emitter here, and I'll put it on Nucleus 1, that's fine. I'll make this a directional emitter, create. All right, so here's my new emitter. And if I delete my end particles that came with it, I can actually go to Window Relationship Editors, Dynamic Relationships, click on my rockets, go to emitters, and tell it to emit from my new brand new emitter 4. So here's emitter 4 right there. And if I rotate him around, and I give him a little bit more speed, because right now he's just going like super slow. Let's go to 10. Let's go to some spread here. I lowered my rate, right? Yeah, I want. All right, let's go higher than 10. Let's go to like 45. There we go. So now I have these other ones that are they're still being emitted. Everything else is still going to work the same because everything else is based on those particles. But now I just have this other emitter that I could put somewhere else. So if I had 38 tanks, I could attach this thing to one tank, make a new one, attach it to another tank, make a new one, attach it to another tank. I think I can even duplicate. I go back to dynamic relationships, click on my rockets, go to emitters, go to emitter 5, rewind, hit play. Make sure it's emitting something. Right now the rate was at 0. There we go, yep. See, so I can just duplicate this entire thing and I would have loads of fun all day long. Don't go to that party on Saturday night. Just sit home and play with instancing and play with particles, make stuff explode. That's why you took the class. And so we can break stuff and have things explode. Alright, so that's enough talking today. And have fun.